Good afternoon. You're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Jes Delos Santos. Let's take a look at how the local bourse closed today, Thursday. All right, another normal day for the index, meaning shares ending the day in the red yet again, and it has been that way for the past 5 days. But today, while ending on the downside, shares managed to temper losses before session close. The index earlier went as low as 6,233, but a last-minute buying pushed shares higher to 6,282, but still lower by 0.3% from Wednesday's close. This as economic managers expect employment gains recorded in March to be reversed by April due to a return to ECQ and MECQ. Joblessness in March went down to 7.1% from 8.8% the month prior. That means unemployed Filipinos down to 3.44 million from 4.19 in February, according to Labor Secretary Silvestre Bello. The economy is gradually getting back on track as more people are actively participating in the labor force and are becoming employed. The DOLE is one with the economic team in pushing for the safe reopening of businesses, but a return to a stricter quarantine might actually set us back. You have former NEDA Secretary Ernesto Pernia saying that the extended MECQ until mid-May might mean reversal of gains, not just for the month of April, but even, of course, until the month of May. That, of course, sent shares on a 5-day slump now, like what I mentioned earlier, tumbling by 3.2% over that period. But year to date, looking at how shares are performing, still not a pretty picture here for the main index, as it has slid 12% so far, with only three stocks in the green at least year to date, and FGen being still the best performer so far in the index. But for today, it's still half and half here. If you try to take a look at our leaders and laggards for the day, it would show here. You have here JG Summit, still the day's best performer, up by over 3% here. Also, you have the likes of Megaworld, higher by 2% after it said that setting capex for 2021 at 36 billion pesos. That is a 29% increase compared to 2020. 76% of that is going to real estate development. For Metro Pacific, as you can see, also gaining by as much here, over by 2%. That's after attributable net income is up over 270%. To 7 billion pesos, despite core net income lower by 26% to 2.5 billion pesos. SM also, as you can see here, is ending the day in the red. One of our worst performers here, down to 3.2%. That's despite net income coming up by 5%. And also, while we're on earnings here, let's take a look at PLDT. Their first quarter numbers just came out before close. You have net income coming in lower by 1.8% to 5.8 billion pesos. Revenues likewise also, as you can see, is gaining, in fact, up by 9.8% to 47.9 billion pesos, while core income is up by 9% to 7.5 billion pesos. That as it excludes impact of asset sales and Voyager. They've also seen sustained demand for data, broadband supported service revenue growth as well. Also, looking at some of their units here, PLDT Home revenue for that segment is up 19% to 10.9 billion pesos, while consumer wireless revenue also increased by 7% to 22.1 billion pesos. They're setting 88 billion to 92 billion pesos for their capex this year. For first quarter alone, that's already amounted to 20.7 billion pesos. PLDT Chairman Manny Pangilinan is expressing optimism for the year ahead, saying shifting quarantine restrictions strengthens the mandate for strong digital services. Pangilinan also did say that PLDT Chief Revenue Officer Al Panlilio will be named as next president and CEO. That's going to happen next month. Again, you have an annual shareholders meeting scheduled for June. That's when Pangilinan will be retiring as president and CEO of PLDT, passing the baton over to Al Panlilio so that Pangilinan could stay as chairman of PLDT. Looking at how PLDT performed for Thursday, Still on the upside here, up by 1.1% to 1,264 a share. Here are other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. Bank lending in the volatile real estate sector hit a 3-year high as of end June last year. The combined real estate loan exposure of major players in the banking industry increased to 20.7% of the sector's total loan book in end June last year. That's the sixth straight quarter that real estate loans disbursed by major banks rose, and the highest sprint recorded since June 2017. Real estate exposure of local banks has been on the rise since the first quarter of 2019 due to higher cost of acquiring real properties in the country. Bank lending in the sector is projected to increase even further after the BSP raised the real estate loan limit of big banks from 20% to 25% of total loans. This is expected to free up an estimated 1.2 trillion pesos for additional lending to the sector amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The Tourism Department is now working with LGUs to allow those in MECQ areas to enter specific tourist destinations. That's according to Interagency Task Force Co-Chairman Carlo Nograles on his interview with Agenda. Nograles said Tourism Secretary Berna Puyat is in talks with local executives to permit tourists from MECQ areas like Metro Manila to enter their city or province. Recall that Puyat was able to do this when the capital region was in GCQ, while most of the country was placed under MGCQ. But now that NCR is under a stricter quarantine classification, Nograles admitted that reacquiring LGU approval has become a challenge. Let's circle back to our top story with unemployment easing for the month of March to 7.1%. But will that just be a one-off? Given the return to stricter quarantine measures, to give us his insights on that and more is RCBC Chief Economist Mike Ricafort. Good afternoon, Sir Mike.
Hi, good afternoon, Jes, and to your viewers.
Okay, let's kick things off with, of course, employment figures that came out this morning. How might the return to MECQ and ECQ affect the gains that we saw last month, and how many will the stricter lockdown add to the number of unemployed, especially from the NCR Plus area?
Well, that's true, Jess, because the survey of the labor survey just came after, right before rather the hard lockdown on March 29. So that's why it's kind of surprising to see the latest data, unemployment data, easing to 7.1% from 8.8%. But nonetheless, that still reflected the reopening of measures to reopen the economy in the early part of the month, but only to be taken back. In view of the ECQ that started on March 29 for 2 weeks and until April 11, and it was followed by MECQ. Though that's a reality, we may see the unemployment rate picking up again come for the month of April because of course the hard lockdowns resulted to some reduction in economic and business activities and lower capacity for some industries and businesses. But the only difference now is that compared to a year ago, the hard lockdowns a year ago, is that we still have public transportation, and some of the thereby allowing many of the essential industries and the workers to be able to do their jobs and to be able to fulfill their work. So at least that's a key difference, because if you recall, Jess, a year ago, we saw the peak in unemployment rate around April of last year. So we would only see some slight uptick, maybe towards it will be definitely high single-digit levels. It would be less than 10%, maybe around back to 8 or even 9%, that at best. So that's what we have to expect. But hopefully, this would only be temporary, because the ECQ was only good for 2 weeks, and we already had MECQ, meaning there's already greater capacity for the operations of many businesses and industries since April 12, and that would last until May 14. unless extended. So that's how we see things, hopefully. And well, if things get better, because the 7.1% data that we had, that's prior to the hard lockdowns, that's the best
Mhm.
since the lockdowns. That's the best since
Since the
January
pandemic
of last
started
year.
for the country, yeah.
Yeah, so and that happened at the time of GCQ.
Mhm.
So there's a good chance again, maybe in the coming months, if the cases get better, and especially if the vaccines arrive in a large way. Well,
Mhm.
we only had good news just a few hours ago that we would see an increase in COVID-19 vaccine supply come
Mhm.
May, and hopefully the expectation is still third quarter and or the fourth quarter, and hopefully by then cases would meaningfully go down for the new COVID cases, and that would allow and justify further reopening of the economy, and hopefully we would be back to GCQ and
Mhm.
employment data would improve thereafter.
And a good thing, while we're still, of course, in employment here, you have now the IATF at least considering providing wage support for affected employees over the next 3 months here. And at the same time, you also have better chances now with Bayanihan 3 getting passed. How big of a boost will that be for the economy, for recovery?
Well, definitely, Jess. That would definitely, well, it would help because we just came. Well, the Create Bill now, which was just passed last March 26th, and the IIR expected in the coming days within this month. Well, that would add at least 100 billion per year in terms of reduced tax revenue collections from the corporations. But this would be eventually, it would come to a point that there would that additional stimulus measures would be considered, but provided that there would be revenue sources, new revenue sources from them, and at the same time, well, it could come from say increased dividends by the GOCCs, the national government has proposed, as well as some of the savings in some of the budget items that may be reallocated to this proposed stimulus measure. So that would definitely help and try to expedite, especially on the hard hit sectors, because
Mhm.
realistically, the ECQ and the MECQ now that we've been having for more than 3 weeks already. Definitely, there would be some sectors, the hard hit sectors that may need assistance, whether they're businesses, and of course, like say MSMEs that would need loan guarantees and assistance that could be channeled through these MSMEs and other businesses,
Mhm.
and also outright assistance also to the hard hit sector, especially the those who were laid off or those who were left unemployed by this hard lockdown. So,
Mhm.
well, that's part of course, that's part of the immediate response enabled to counter the adverse economic effects of these hard lockdowns.
Now, one other economic data, Sir Mike, that came in this week, of course, just yesterday, you have April inflation that came in steady at 4.5%. Is this a sign of the price index finally tapering off, or are we still bound to see a peak here?
Well, realistically, around the world, as we have seen it in the latest data in the US, inflation would remain to be relatively elevated because we are all coming from a very low base. A year ago, especially starting April to May, that's the hard lockdowns. We're already at the anniversary of that. And exactly a year ago as well, we saw global oil prices reaching record lows. No? Especially, particularly last April 22 of 2020, when we saw, say, the Brent crude oil price declining to a record low of $13, the NYMEX crude oil at negative $40. Now they're back to almost well, ranging from 64 to 66 dollar levels. They're back practically to pre-COVID-19 levels, the end 2019 levels, and among the highest already in about 1.5 years. So definitely, year on year, with that, inflation would mathematically pick up. The only
Mhm.
thing that would mitigate this, well, good thing, because one of the catalysts for the higher inflation has been food prices since the storm damage in the latter part of last year. We're not seeing that anymore. Weather conditions have improved into
Mhm.
the dry season and summer season. We have seen increased planting, harvests, and yields that resulted to lower prices of vegetables, agricultural products, including fruits, as well as Hopefully, well, a major catalyst would in the coming days and weeks would be the proposed reduction in the tariffs of pork imports, as
Mm.
well as
Now,
the
good thing that you mentioned that, sir, because a compromise has been reached here for Executive Order 128. A tariff rates will be reduced, if I'm not mistaken, to around 10 or 15%, as well as minimum access volume. How might this, in a way, affect the expected gains from the Executive Order?
well, definitely yes. Oh yeah, there may be some compromise, but it would still be significant enough to reduce pork or meat prices, which have already gained in recent months by more than 20% year on year. And definitely that would help reduce the headline inflation data. Now it's at,
By how much, if you
yeah,
can
it
just
would,
be clear about it, sir? By how
yeah.
much do you expect this EO to at least somehow temper the rise in inflation?
Yeah, there's a chance just for the headline inflation rate to move closer to 4%. So, and even maybe in the coming months, especially in the latter part of the year, if the low base effect dissipates, we still expect the low base to continue on until September to October. And then, wow, thereafter, we would see a significant easing of the inflation rate back to 3% levels by then. But even before that, well, the say if now if the inflation now is 4.5, maybe a little over four, or maybe a little less than 4%. There's a chance for us to see our headline inflation in the coming months, especially if this would be well, say if the compromise would push through and eventually be passed right away. So that would definitely help ease inflation, at least on the supply side when it comes to food supply, then meat. The only thing that we have to contend to now is the relatively higher global commodity prices like
Mhm.
oil, as well as other major global commodities. On the average, are at their highest levels in 8 to 10 years. So that's the thing that's beyond our control. And more importantly, Jess, on the demand side, that's why our inflation has been fairly stable, and it has tapered off already from the highs 2 months ago. Is the fact that, of course, with the with the hard lockdowns, the now we're currently at MECQ, that definitely reduced significantly economic activities and business activities. That also fundamentally reduce demand conditions and
Okay.
as well as the inflationary pressure. So hopefully, hopefully we would still see inflation at least relatively steady at a little over 4%, and hopefully the latter part of the year, especially in the fourth quarter, it would go down to 3% levels, and we will
Lastly,
have an
now, Sir
average.
Mike,
Yes.
before we let you go, we're expecting GDP to come out next week. What's your outlook here, or what figure are you looking at?
Well, for the first quarter, definitely we're still coming from a relatively high base because January to February of last year, those are pre-COVID levels, pre-lockdown levels. So we're expecting low negative single digit level around -3 because that already incorporates the some of the tighter quarantine standards in the latter part of March. We only had the ECQ on March 20, March
Mm.
29. So that's practically 3 days into the quarter, and that is still Holy Week when economic activities are normally relatively low and holiday mode. So that's how we see it, and hopefully, well, good news by the second quarter. We're coming from a very low base, from almost negative 17% a year ago. So therefore, and economic conditions much better now. Even the lockdowns now are much better with public transportation and essential industries and businesses still operating. So there's a good chance to see double-digit GDP growth by the second quarter. At least we're talking about somewhere between positive 11 to 12%, only to average for the full year around 5 to 6%, because in the third quarter it would be around 7%, and in the fourth quarter around 4% growth. So
Okay,
yeah,
so
that's how
some
we see
level of
things.
optimism there for the entire year, for full year 2021, at least coming from your perspective, growth at 5 to 6%. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon, RCBC Chief Economist Mike Ricafort. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jess, and fair viewers. Have a nice day.
And those are the biggest stories this trading day, May 6, 2021. Catch Business World Live again tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. for the market open and 3:15 p.m. for the market close. I'm Jes Delos Santos. We are One News. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines.